We're going to call to order our workshop November 14th, 2023 at 5:30. Item B, declaration of a quorum, 7 members present. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for being here. Item C, hearing of citizens. Do we have anything? Nothing tonight. Brings to item D1, review November 7th, 2023 election results and related timelines.
Yeah, just a quick recap. We will canvass the election results tomorrow at a meeting at noon. Preliminary results had Prop A passing by right at 70%, Prop B by 62%, and then Prop C and D, we got up to 47.5%, but just didn't get quite across the finish line. So the timeline is to get those election results canvass tomorrow, and then quite honestly just having some discussion on the next steps. Obviously thrilled about A and B passing, largest bond in the history of the school district. Also having some needs on C and D that we didn't quite get to the finish line, but those needs are still there. And you know, just got some discussion points. We've had those discussions internally with leadership team on our next steps. Open the floor for you guys to ask questions or share your thoughts.
Anybody have anything?
I'd say I just want to thank the PAC for the efforts that they made. I know a lot of people took a lot of time and their own resources to do that and try to help us, and I think it had positive impact. And like I said, we got 50% of the way there, and we got another 50% to go.
And I would like to thank our members of the cabinet that helped. We had 65 bond presentations throughout the school district. I was very pleased with the plan that was in place when I got here. And I don't think there's anything that I would change with the process. I think, just like you said, Darren, I think the PAC did a great job, but I think from a district standpoint, our communication plan was good. Signage was great throughout. It's just a tough market. There were 65 failed propositions in the state. 31 of those dealt with athletics or fine arts or natatoriums. So it's not just a College Station issue. It is trying to get anything outside of just classroom core instruction stuff passed is difficult right now. But realize too, when we were, I believe, around 650 to 700 votes short out of 7,000, it's definitely gettable. I mean, we're close, you know, to get another 700 votes. Honestly, getting up to 1,000, I don't think is a difficult process. I think there's a lot of momentum with the school district and with the support of public ed here in College Station ISD. And I think we need to go out and get it. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, yes, so much work done here in the district, but also with the PAC and others, the committee and their voices as well. So, but you're mentioning the gap there on those two, because to me, obviously, I think most of us would agree. We put it out there because it's a need. And so I think we need to discuss how do we best go about meeting that need, right? And so are you going to be able today to give us a little bit of timeline? Options?
In my opinion, I would like to reconvene the planning committee in January and to get their thoughts. I think they put together a great proposal that you guys called for the bond election back in August. And I think we get their thoughts on where we are. In order to call for another election for May of 24, we'd have to call that. I don't know the exact date. It is the middle of February. I think our February board meeting most likely would be in that time frame, but I could get that exact date. So that would give us an opportunity to get the thoughts of our planning committee that I think is important of what that recommendation would look like. The planning aspect, and then all the logistics, which is what's so time consuming, is already done. Amy has already reached out to VLK. There could be some pricing changes. Obviously, inflation, the can's getting kicked down the road a few months, but not multiple years. You know, that price multiple years from now obviously is going to look a lot different than it would in the next 6 to 7 months. And get that committee's idea of, do you scale back any of the projects or do you move forward as is? And I think you get that feedback and then see where they are, and then they could possibly bring a recommendation to the board if that's what they feel like they'd like to do in February.
I think one more piece on the education, because we can't campaign, but we can educate. And we had, I think, one individual openly speak out against the athletic bonds in particular, but that same individual probably wants young people and employees to learn about teamwork and competition and doing things that are hard, and challenging each other and learning respect and inclusivity and all those things. And that's exactly what athletics does. And so I think that's something we can continue to push, because that's something that everybody needs to learn. And I think we know that there are kids that maybe don't love school, but they love the opportunities they have in athletics to attend school. And so I think that's something we just need to continue to educate certain folks on.
We can go farther than that. I mean, many of us were, if you're at the game where the two schools played each other, I mean, there were so many people out there, and it was so much more than just a football game, right? It is the teams and the bands and the dance teams and the cheerleaders and the choir and the AVP people filming it, and the sports medicine people supporting it. There are so many people involved there from our student standpoint, getting all the experiences you're talking about, and more. It's a big part of growing our students. So, I mean, obviously, I believe in it.
I do think educating our community a little bit more is important. I think when you talk about a stadium, everybody, we just call it a football stadium. That's just, everybody refers to it as that. But I think if we got out from an educational standpoint and had each high school just kind of really dictate from July through June, of course, of a given year, the different sports and activities that are at that particular stadium over the course of an entire year. I think maybe some of us would even be surprised at what groups actually utilize that particular facility. Kevin made a good point, too, with the passage of Prop A, each high school now, the capacity of those high schools grow. In particular, the field house at Consolidated right now, we're out of space. You're growing the capacity of the high school. Programs are going to grow. The space isn't there as is right now, but I think we could go out, and that educational piece, some folks are going to be closed-minded because it doesn't have to do with reading and writing, and that's their choice. That's perfectly fine. But there are those that do support, just like Darren said, on the teamwork. There's life skills that are taught on a basketball court, on a football field, on a baseball, softball field, and just getting out and really educating and taking a different perspective of what we did that I feel like worked, but take a different twist of the utilization of all the different programs that are in and out of that facility and field house is important.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I was fairly more than disappointed. Obviously, the big parts of the bond passed, but it was almost kind of overwhelming that night with the way the legislature has bonds set up with the current climate. We're never going to get this thing passed. But having a chance to think about it for a few days, I think it's an opportunity to educate the voters in College Station ISD about the real need, and if the committee comes back and suggests doing a bond for just athletics, for example, maybe having that opportunity to just focus on that might be beneficial, because we can really just kind of focus on, this is the current condition of the field house at Consol. This is what the track looks like, so forth and so on, and so going to try to look at it as an opportunity as we move forward.
I think when you look at the analytics part of it, I'll be anxious to see the further detail as we get that back, precinct data, things like that, because we can sit and talk about education, but if we don't really know who to kind of talk to specifically, that I think we're losing voice on that. So I'll be anxious to look at the analytics. I mean, the Tiger Fieldhouse, we've talked about it for, I feel like, a few years now. Y'all, and we all know, but it's the same Tiger Fieldhouse that was there in '97 when I was there. It's the same box. You can change the inside all day long, but it was built for a certain capacity. And I'm not saying it was built for the capacity that Consol was back when I was there, but I don't think it was built for the capacity that we currently have. So that's why it's always been a need. So the education part on that is obviously crucial and critical. But I think that analytics part of which specific precincts might have voted against C&D and maybe why, what was it about the bond? Was it the whole bond? Was there bits and pieces of it? Because we can't get any better if we don't understand what parts we might have been missing. So that'll be the interesting part to kind of find out as we move through this over the next few months.
Yeah, we'll have a deeper dive into the numbers when we get back from Thanksgiving break. Yeah.
Did you say something about a survey or something that could possibly go out? Did you say?
Yeah, there will be some work that the VOK team will do as far as surveying at the end of election cycles. They will pinpoint certain school districts to go out in the community and get survey information on the pros and cons just from a planning aspect of what they felt like worked and what people supported and why they supported it. And then on other projects, if you didn't support, what was the thought process behind that?
Right. I think
Which would
the
be
why.
great information for us to be able to have.
Right. I think learning that why from our constituents is very important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Forward.
And you're saying that would be even for A and B, because, I mean, while the 70% is wonderful, there's still 30% out there even for A and B who just were not willing to vote yes for it. And even understanding those no's.
Understanding why they voted yes too.
Well, yeah, exactly. Understanding both sides. And I still, some of that, everybody's gonna have some personal reasons. But I think there's even education on that side of it too. I mean, you still hear from people, they just don't quite understand that this is the system for funding our facilities and capital improvements in public education. This is how it's supposed to be done through local bonds.
Yeah, their sampling will be across all props. Yes, ma'am.
And bonds can't be used for compensation is a big one that we want to make sure it's on the record. So anything else? Okay, that brings us to item D2, consideration and discussion related to the 2024-25 school calendar development process. Ms. Parkerson.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Horak, Dr. Harkrider, and members of the board. I'm here this evening to give an overview of where we are in the calendar development process with our District Education Improvement Council as we look forward toward the 2024-25 school year. David, I do have a presentation. Okay, good deal. It's not that many slides, so I can wing it if we need to. So while we're waiting for that to go, we actually started this process last month at our October DIC meeting, where we took some time to really talk about the constraints and opportunities that we have every year whenever we consider our academic calendar. And I'll share with you the priorities that arose from that discussion and that feedback. This month here in November, we looked at several draft calendars based on the feedback that they provided, including calendars that were modeled after some of the neighboring districts and districts throughout the state that they wanted us to take a look at as well. They examined 4 different calendars. We gathered their feedback. In fact, that feedback survey just closed this morning. And so I've shared that now with Cabinet, and we're going to take that feedback and allow campuses the opportunity to gather some good old-fashioned informal feedback at the campus level with some posters and things up in the workroom. And then in December, we will bring back at least 2 calendars for your consideration. So I feel like I need to go ahead and be up front and let you know I will not show you any draft calendars tonight. This is really about the process that we go through. So as we consider those multiple feedbacks, we think about our entire CSISD community with our students first and foremost, and certainly then how we as educators and their families work together to make sure that we're creating a calendar that best meets the many needs that students have. we took the feedback from each individual table group, synthesized that, looked for those patterns, and through that process, really identified 4 key areas that we were going to prioritize as we continue to work forward with our calendar, and use this almost as a rubric or a litmus test, if you will, as to whether a calendar fits the bill and can do all of these things. So first and foremost, in the academics calendar or category, we want to make sure that we're maximizing our learning time that we actually have with our students. The state of Texas requires that we have 76,500 instructional minutes per academic calendar. We also know that all of our teachers are on a 187-day teacher calendar. So those 76,500 minutes equate to about 170 full school days with our students as a frame of reference. And so that push and pull on our time that we have with our kids in our classrooms, the time that we have for professional learning, and so forth, all really falls under that academic umbrella and making sure we're maximizing that learning time. There was also a lot of feedback about grading period lengths, trying to have them as even and consistent as possible throughout the year, so that when we're looking at timing and pacing of course materials, especially of our semester courses, that they have equitable opportunity to have the same amount of time spent in that content. And then timing of final exams and graduation just really continues to be important as we solicit feedback over the years from our community as well, with an emphasis being on making sure that fall semester ends before we go on winter break, so that students who may be transitioning between schools and opportunities, different things, have an opportunity to do that before they move into the spring semester. Graduation, the preference is generally for that to make sure to be in May, preferably around or before the Labor Day holiday. Okay. Our second category is really student and educator wellness. Our student needs, such as childcare, whenever we do have extended breaks or even a half day or a full day off, making sure that they are with us in our safe school environments as frequently as possible, and that we are able to address some of those food insecurity needs during that time that we have them with us in our school buildings as well. And then on the side of educator wellness, intermittent breaks throughout the year are just frankly good for everybody. And not only having that time for professional learning, but really true breaks where our educators are able to unplug and disconnect and reset and ready themselves to serve our kids well after those breaks is really important. I've spoken to this a little bit. Educator development is a priority. We are a learning organization. All of us continue to learn, and we need to make sure we embed that time in the year. And then we had a lot of feedback about the frequency, timing, and the length of our breaks. At this point, Thanksgiving break being a week long has become the norm, and so that continues to be a priority and preference that is expressed through the feedback we've received so far. Winter breaks, having enough time to make sure that our families who might be sharing custody of students, our families who might be traveling internationally to see family and so forth, have enough time within that, and that's a minimum of 2 weeks for that winter break is the feedback that we've received. We also have a preference for easing into the school year, whether it be in August or in January when we come back, the feedback shows that we have a preference for making sure that it's a 3 or 4 day week starting those semesters so that we can get back into our procedures and routines before continuing forward from there. And certainly being in a university community, we want to make sure that our key breaks are aligned as well as we can have them with Texas A&M University and Blinn College, especially around their spring break. So really, once again, we're looking at how well a calendar prioritizes academic time, student educator wellness, educator development, and then looking at that frequency of breaks with a desire from the committee to have intermittent breaks throughout the year that supports all 3 of those items above with academics, wellness, and development. So we presented this year 4 calendar options. They're beautifully color-coded, and I purposely made sure you couldn't really see anything on them because they are draft calendars based on that feedback. I think that we'll readily eliminate it down to 3 before we go to the informal feedback cycle with the campuses, and maybe even 2 based on the feedback that we have. And with that, our next step will be that informal feedback with the committee. You go back?
Just kidding.
Could you, David, could you zoom in on calendar A? So I will say as we move forward, after we bring a couple of options for y'all to review in December, we will then put those forward for a formalized community-wide survey that will be available for several weeks. We'll bring that feedback back to the DIC in January, make any refinements based on that feedback there. And then our hope is in January to be able to bring forward a recommendation for our 2024-25 calendar for your consideration and potential adoption in January. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about our process.
I also appreciate, just for my education, you've given us kind of adjacent districts calendars kind of compare against. I think it's not the primary concern, but obviously the plurality of our parents are associated with A&M, so we have to align, whereas other schools don't have to. And also, I'm more than happy to let other schools kind of test out the innovative calendars, like the 4-day weeks and the year-round schooling, and we'll see how those shake out. And I appreciate you giving us that, and we can look at it next year.
Is it December y'all send it out, the survey, to like everybody?
Yes, sir.
How long is that open for?
Off the top of my head, I believe it's about 2 weeks.
I'm not mistaken, is that like the 2 weeks before school gets out?
It is leading into the break. Yes.
Just thinking out loud, would it be possible, would it be wise to extend that 3 days to a week just because of the hectic life of December?
I will take a look
Just
at
curious.
the timing of.
And I don't
when we
know
come
if y'all are
back.
happy with in
Yeah.
past years, and I can't remember, I was on DIC a few years back. Can't remember the response on those surveys, if we're getting what we want as far as feedback and actual activity. Just curious.
I will say anecdotally, we have had robust participation in past years, even with the timing. But certainly, we want to make sure that every voice is heard and extend that net as wide as we can.
Yeah,
So I'll
no.
take a look at that and work with
Just something
technology
I thought
to
about.
see what the timing is on getting the results back to us in a feasible way in time for that January DIC meeting.
Okay.
You mentioned one thing that's maybe a little different consideration than other years, and that was what you said, the first thing, kind of the balance with and it's been this way a couple years, with the minutes for our students versus the days of our contracts, right? And I know that's, I don't know, can you explain a little bit more? I mean, why it's okay to have those different, or we're going to have different options there, or what do we expect to see with those differences? Because I know that came up in DIC.
Absolutely. And so this year's calendar, for example, has a rather large buffer of instructional minutes. Whenever you look at the number of days that we have with our kids in the buildings with us, plus we have the luxury of using a staff development waiver that the state has allowed us to apply some of those PD days that are happening within the school year toward additional instructional minutes. And so really after that initial conversation with DEIC, there was a lot of questions about that. Why do we have these extra days? What does this mean? And so that's one of the things that I provided a little bit of extra information about for our DIC this year, really looking at the instructional minutes themselves and the times that we have with kids versus the additional PD time that we can add to that buffer for instructional minutes, but also really how that works with the time that we have with our teachers. And so we know that we need time to prepare for the school year. We generally have calendars that have at least 5 days prior to the school starting that would count toward the teachers' contractual days. And then from there, we get some choice as to where we use those within the school year and even after the school year gets out. You'll see some school calendars where the teachers have several days at the end. Based on our feedback, that has not been the preference within our school district, but you will see that in some cases. And so as a DEIC, we have to look at both. We need to make sure that we have the number of days for our educators to meet their needs and to have the professional development built in, but also to make sure that we are maximizing the amount of time that we have with our kids in the building. And so really that was the clarity I was trying to bring at the last meeting, is that it's not one or the other. We're not just aiming to get to 187 days and we're done. We have to also then look at the instructional minutes based on that constraint that we are given.
And just so you're aware, all 4 calendars have the exact same start date. Generally, in years past, you would have an earlier start date and a later start date based on the renovations and things that we have going every summer. We did not even put out an option with an earlier start date because it just puts our facilities team, John and his crew, at a disadvantage from the get-go. We're already chasing days when we start those projects, and that 7-day buffer is too important for us. We know we have to open school, and that's not an option not to, but there's only 24 hours in a day, and taking 7 days away from that team just didn't make sense. So all 4 calendar options have the same start date, which I believe is the 3rd Wednesday in August. So if you get feedback of why we didn't have a earlier start date option, that is why.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brings us to item D3, receive a report on the English as a second language and emergent bilingual programs. I believe Ms. Ayala.
All righty. Good evening, Mr. Horak and Dr. Harkrider and the board. And I just want to, first of all, thank y'all for allowing me to come in. And I apologize that I kind of was not able to be here last month when it was originally planned to be presented, but I do appreciate y'all's flexibility in allowing me to make this presentation. This presentation is important because not only is it our opportunity to share with y'all, the board, and the community about our bilingual and ESL programming that we have, but it is actually something that's required by law. And so we make sure that this program meets the statutory requirements of the laws that oversee our programming as well. So first of all, we just want to take a moment to kind of think about what are the specific programs that we have here in College Station ISD. When you think about our bilingual program, we serve our students that are participating in that program through a dual language immersion program. For our pre-K and our Head Start students, we do that in the one-way program, which means they're receiving about 90% of their day in their primary language, which is Spanish, as well as some intensive English language development and academic support as well. For our students who are in the kinder through 6th grade, we actually have our dual language program that is considered a two-way dual language program. Not only is this program our bilingual program for our students who English is not their first language and they are acquiring English, but it also gives us the opportunity to be able to provide some opt-in options for our students in our community to become bilingual, to learn Spanish. And so we run that through our 50-50 model, which means roughly 50% of their instructional time is provided to them in Spanish, and the other 50% is in English. On the other side, we do have students whose first language is not Spanish, and so and they need English language development support, and we are able to provide them support through our ESL program, our English as a Second Language program. In our earlier grades, in our pre-K through 6th grade, we handle that through a content-based ESL program, and the important thing to note about that is all of the teachers who are providing core academic support for those students, whether it be in English language arts, math, science, or social studies, they are all required to be ESL certified within that program at that level. In the secondary level, our 7th grade through 12th grade kiddos, we tend to serve them through what we call, or what's referred to as a pull-out ESL program, and that allows us to really target some intensive English language development for the students who are sitting at the beginning and intermediate English language level proficiency, and then have the other students being more in sheltered opportunities out into the rest of their classes. In CSISD, we do require that for all of our English language arts teachers and all of our English at the high school teachers, that for them to be able to serve our emergent bilingual students, that they are expected to have their ESL certification as well, so that they have that extra training and knowledge base to be able to truly support our students in that program. So if we can take a minute to kind of think about who are our EB students in our district, I think it's really important to kind of look and see. We know that the majority of our students are our Spanish speakers, but we really have a very, very rich and diverse collection of languages that are represented within our EB students. In fact, we have, if you look at the whole population, even beyond our EB students, you're looking at somewhere around 73 different languages that are available in any family here. But when you really target our EB students who are participating in that English language development, and you look at our top 10% languages of it, you still get a wonderful, diverse smattering and representation of the world that our kids are coming to us from.
Sorry, can I stop? Why is English on that graph? Sorry.
Thank you for the question. So when a student enrolls in our schools, they are required to fill out what they call a home language survey. And on that home language survey, there's a few questions. And the questions are, these questions are dictated by state law, right? One of the questions is, what is the language you and your family and your child mostly speak? And what is the language that is mostly spoken at home? And parents can fill out anything they want to. Like they are going to tell us what their correct answers are. And sometimes we have parents who will indicate English and English. However, when we have the students enrolled in our schools and we meet them and we realize sometimes that actually they really do need to be considered for some additional English support, that English language proficiency is not where we need it to be so that they can truly benefit from the academic content that we're providing for our students. Once you get beyond the first 2 weeks of school, you are not allowed to go back and change that home language survey. And so the English would stand. So we're honoring their answers. All of that to say. Thank you for your question. So in this one, it's just really important to kind of see, it's like everything else. Not only has our school district really exploded in the last 5 to 6 years, right? But our EB population has truly continued to be. This is an amazing place to be, and people want to bring their kids. And it doesn't matter whether you're from the other side of Texas or you're from a whole nother country. They know that they've got family or people, and they're saying, "Hey, come." And they are coming, and we're seeing a huge uptick. Even if you see the green line represents overall the growth of our EB students, and I also included the other 2 lines. One of them kind of gives you a visual representation of that overall EB students, how many of those are truly in our bilingual program number-wise, and then also the ESL with the orange line. So I wanted to make sure that y'all kind of had an understanding of what that breakdown is within our EB students in our programming. So one of the most important things that we can do for students when they come and join us in our district is to make sure that we're providing them the best education possible. And the state of Texas evaluates part of that academic growth through our STAR assessments. And so what I have represented for you here is kind of an accumulation of our STAR for grades 3 through 8, and it looks at all of the reading. So from 3 through 8th grade, all of the reading tests clustered together, all of the math tests clustered together, all of the science tests, and then all of the social studies. And I've also broken out for you our reclassified. Those are kids who have met English proficiency and have been able to exit the program since they've been with us, as well as the overall CSISD. I think it's also important to note that science STAR exams happen in 5th grade. You don't have as many different tests feeding into them. And so the students are kind of dropping in there and being able to have one shot at providing that data information, as well as the social studies. One happens in 8th grade for those students. There's a couple of things I want to make sure that y'all understand from this. What you can't parse out necessarily, but is critically important to understand, is not everybody shows up at our campuses and in our district at kindergarten. Some of them come to us in 3rd grade from another country. Some of them come to us in 5th grade or 7th grade, as it be. Some of them haven't been in school for 4 years before they get to us. And we welcome them with open arms and say, you come here and we're going to help you, we're going to love you, and we're going to take care of you, and we're going to get you on the path to being able to be academically successful. And that takes time and it takes acclimation. And some of these babies have been through huge amounts of trauma, and we're taking care of all of those pieces. So what you can't parse out is in this information is, okay, have you been here 1 year? Have you been here 8 years by the time you fall into this test? But the less amount of time you've had the benefit of being in our system, the more likely you are to still be at that beginning level of your academic performance. And the state of Texas doesn't care how long you've been here. They want you to test. They want a baseline. They want to see some data. And so we've included it in. I hope you're noticing that when our students reclassify and leave our program and join, they're a forever EBs. I don't want to pretend like they're not. They're always our babies and part of our family there. But they're knocking the tops off when they leave it. So what we know is, for our kiddos who are here and have plenty of time to benefit from what we do, they're doing amazing things in the program. So again, we also have high school, and if you'll look, you've got it, as you know, to be able to graduate from high school, the state requires that you have participated in and met a participation or passing requirement for 5 EOCs. 2 of them are English ones, a math, which is through Algebra 1, biology, and then the U.S. history one. Again, it all depends on when you get here as to how much time you've had to be able to truly benefit from the academic support of our teachers and the ESL benefits that our teachers are providing. In the last year, we had a huge influx of immigrant students from Guatemala, from Venezuela, and from a couple other countries, but those 2 countries really we had a huge influx. And those are the students that you're seeing who are testing because they are expected to and required to, but they've not had yet the time to truly benefit. But we know that once they've been with us for a while and they're able to develop that English level of proficiency and they're able to exit, that again, across the board, you'll see they're knocking the top off and just doing amazing things. So we're excited about it. We just know it takes time. So I call this the bamboo slide because to me it just looks like a bunch of bamboo kind of up here, but I want to explain kind of what you're looking at. So TELPAS is our English language proficiency exam that our students who are EBs take to allow us to be able to kind of document and track how are they progressing in their English language proficiency development. And so on this slide, you've got your kindergarten through 6th grade, but I've also broken it out so you can see our kiddos who are participating in our bilingual program. So that would be our EB students who are within our dual language program, as well as those students who are not part of the dual language program and they're part of the ESL program. And so the red part means when they took the assessment that they were performing at a beginning level of English language proficiency. Yellow represents the intermediate, light green, I guess, is the advanced, and then the darker green is the advanced high. The TELPAS exam not only expects just a baseline level of English, but it's looking at they have to be able to perform in the speaking realm, in the listening realm, in reading, and in writing. So it is a very rigorous expectation for them to be able to produce and demonstrate their progress of English language proficiency. The other piece about it is it's important to understand that for second grade and up, it is all online. So even like the listening and the speaking part, they may be listening on headphones to somebody talking like some different things, and then they have to, respond in a visual, like click on the thing that it was associated with the thing that was described or whatnot, or they're going to get asked a question and they have a microphone and they're going to have to record and to be able to answer and provide all of that. And if you tap on top of that, if I'm a kiddo who hasn't been here very long and I come from a country where maybe I didn't have easy access to technology, for some of our kiddos, it's not only about their English ability, it's also about how do you manage the technology sometimes. But they're doing great things. And then at our secondary levels, we don't have bilingual education at our secondary levels, right? And so you're seeing the ESL progress for them here. So I had already kind of mentioned the idea of reclassification, and previously we used to refer to it as exiting. And what reclassification is, it means that you've met a certain level on the TELPAS of your English language proficiency, again, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, but also you've demonstrated some academic fortitude within the English language. For third grade through your English 2, those kiddos can do that on our normal STAR test. If you're outside of that realm, so you're before, so like second grade or whatnot, or you're after 11th grade or 12th grade, then we go old school and give you the Iowa test, and you have to be able to demonstrate at least the 40th percentile of academic proficiency on that to be able to meet the exit or reclassification criteria. Previously, and through this data piece, to be able to reclassify, you had to hit advanced high in all 4 areas, not just like an overall composite, but in all 4 areas. And so with some feedback that the state has been receiving, across and some understanding better about best practices and ways to support English language development for these, or for our EB students, actually going into this year, we're going to have a little bit different approach as a state, and we're going to be looking at a composite advanced high. So it'll allow for those students who potentially are super shy and they're not they really are rocking. They're in, AP classes in high school and all of those different things, but they don't like to talk a whole lot, and especially not on that, McDonald's looking microphone kind of thing. This will allow them to actually be able to meet the mark and reclassify, hopefully for us in this spring, and so that they can stop having to take the TELPAS exam, because I know a lot of them are done with it at that point. Just a reminder, to be able to do what we do with our kids across the board, it costs money. And so we get money from the bilingual education allotment because there's weighted funding that happens based on our numbers of EB students. And we actually even get a little bitty snippet of money from our opt-in students that are part of our dual language program. So that's nice to be able to have that bonus. That's been something that's come on in the last 3 years, really. We also have local monies. We have federal grants. We have the Title III, which specifically is an additional set of money to be able to really take that forward. And so we have a couple of different, or 3 really different pieces of money that all layered in a certain order allow us to really be able to provide a robust program to be able to meet the needs of our emergent bilingual students. And to be able to truly do it, we need amazing staff. And so within our dual language program, we have roughly 44 teachers right now who are serving in dual language, which is our bilingual program, right? 32 of them have their bilingual certification that they are asked to have. 7 of them have their ESL certification. And so for the majority of those who have the ESL, they might be a partner teacher with another bilingual teacher, but they're only covering the English side of the instruction. So they've been partnered up in a certain way to be able to make the most of our teachers that we have. And we have 5 who are working on either their bilingual or their ESL certification. We're actually kind of excited this year because we've had several of our paraprofessionals from our program who are wanting to be teachers and are just amazing. They have the fortitude and the knowledge and are able to provide just outstanding instruction, and they're bilingual. And we've been able to utilize their expertise to help us fill holes in some spots where we didn't have a sufficient number of bilingually certified teachers to really start that process to grow our own bilingual teachers, but also have truly people who are bilingual or maybe who were teachers in their own country before they came to the United States, and to be able to utilize their expertise as well. In addition to the classroom teachers, we also have bilingual reading specialists, and special education teachers. We have 2 bilingual instructional coaches, and we have 6 bilingual instructional assistants, or paraprofessionals, who are in the trenches, pulling groups, supporting kids, and helping them meet their needs. In our ESL program, we have ESL specialists at each campus. We have 12 of them who are full-time and 3 that are half-time. We have some that split campuses and who are going back and forth. But we are each year having to be really reflective and fluid with how we're using our ESL specialists, because our numbers are growing, and we need to make sure that at the campuses where those numbers are, growing and bumping up, that we're moving people to be able to truly support those. And if there's a campus that maybe is in a little bit of a slump number-wise or whatnot, because their time will come, but we can move these teachers around to really make sure that we have a strong person on every campus. In addition to that, we have over 346 teachers who have their ESL certification, who are those teachers that we talked about before, who are either doing the 4 core for our ESL kiddos in our kindergarten through 6th grade programs, or they are English teachers who are providing that targeted support for our kiddos at the secondary level. So certifications, right? The state, obviously, in a perfect world, every teacher in our classrooms would have every single certification that we need them to have. But as we all know, and it's not only something that happens in College Station, across the state of Texas and honestly across the United States, there's a teacher shortage. And when you start thinking about a teacher who is highly trained, very specialized, and just outstanding, you're definitely going to see that then it's even more of an issue being able to always find the best people and people who have that diverse and specialized knowledge base and certification. So tomorrow is actually when it's due. Tomorrow I will be submitting our bilingual exception and our ESL waiver for this school year. And so at this point, and literally I was changing and updating numbers, I don't know, 30 minutes before I walked down here to actually come for our meeting today, because we've been working really hard to identify all of the teacher certifications, and for those who needed to just finish something and get it done, to take care of that. It is not uncommon. We are probably one of, 83% of the districts in the state of Texas who are also, submitting this application. But we know that with our support and the outstanding teachers who are working, everything they can, that we're doing what we need to do to take care of our kiddos in our program. It's important to note, last year we had to submit for 45 teachers. Of those 45 teachers, we actually had, 17, I believe, who actually were able to get that certification and get that taken care of, who are not on our list this year. And some of them decided that maybe they didn't want to take care of that part, and they went somewhere else. And that's okay too, because we are always looking for the best people in our classrooms and who are willing to work through it. Here are the campuses that we're looking at submitting the bilingual exception and the waiver for. The numbers in the exception and the waiver columns represent the number of teachers at that campus. But I also wanted to include for you just a little bit of additional information. I've included the SPED. So like, for example, at Consol High School, they may have 5 teachers that I'm going to be submitting an ESL waiver for, but one of those teachers is also a SPED teacher. And so you're talking about sometimes looking for unicorns, people who have 3, 4, 5 different specialized certifications. And so it is not uncommon for us to be working through that process for those specialized areas. The other thing is, you'll see we have quite a few teachers who have joined our district this year who are participating in an alternative certification program just to be certified to be a teacher, right? And that's exciting. We want people coming into our profession who want to be here and who are willing to, step up and meet that call. But while they're in that program, they are working on whatever that first certification is. They can't take another test and add it on. So those are people who, once they finish their program at the end of this academic school year, will be able to then test this summer and easily add on an ESL supplemental or a bilingual additional supplemental assessment. But they've got to have something to stick it to. It's kind of how we reference it. And so they're still working on that first piece so they can stick something to it. There's lots of professional development that goes on when in a program like ours, and we have been working to make sure that we are pulling in experts in the bilingual instructional realm to be able to provide that kind of instruction for our dual language teachers, as well as providing instruction on for students who are in ESL classes or who are out in the mainstream but still need linguistic support. If they're at the beginning or intermediate level of their English language proficiency, they need some sheltered instruction, some instruction that provides additional verbal support, visual support, and things like that. And it's important that we're providing the teachers the training they need to be successful in meeting the needs of the emergent bilingual students in their classes. And then for our teachers who are working to get the certifications added so that they are, meeting the mark, we work with our local region center as well as bring in entities to provide training at campuses as well as at the district level so that we can make sure that they are ready to take the exam so that they can knock that out and get that added to their educational record as well. In addition, we also have our bilingual instructional coaches who do a phenomenal job meeting the mark and answering the call on whichever one of our campuses might need them to step in and provide some additional support or to help go find some additional resources or whatever might be appropriate based on the needs of that campus and the students. So we did a few things this year to be very specific and targeted about moving our emergent bilingual programs forward. Right? So the first thing we did is we ensured that all of the kids in our dual language program are getting English and Spanish every day. Previously, we had a system in place where they might have gone every other day. Today's an English day, tomorrow's a Spanish day. Or maybe every 2 days, English, English, Spanish, Spanish. Or I got a week of English, and then I got a week of Spanish, and I might not hear Spanish again for another week. And I'm supposed to hold on to that information, right? And that vocabulary that I'm developing. And if I'm learning English, I hadn't heard, I get Spanish this week, but I haven't heard English for a week. And so it was really critical for us to ensure that kids are being bathed in both languages every single day so that we can be providing them lots of opportunities for them to be developing that linguistic strength in their minds and in their academic days as well. We also have begun a movement where we're working with our very early primary classes to utilize a self-contained model. So sometimes in classes you'll see you self-contained means one teacher. I got one teacher and I have them all day long, right? Except for the specials classes that they go out to. But other models might have where they're partnered up and they're going back and forth between two teachers. And even at some of our dual language grade levels, we have what they call departmentalized. And so they might see 4 teachers in a day. And we felt like, and the best practice models really tell us that for our most beginning level of dual language kiddos, the ones who are, kindergarten, going up into 1st grade, that really being with the same teacher who has the ability to one, not lose any time because they're moving from one class to the other, but also to really have that knowledge base and know exactly where you are in their language development and to be able to meet their needs and tweak something and pivot without having to look to somebody else to have that happen. It also increases our ability to provide intervention for them within the classroom. And so being able to increase that academic time on task in those first 2 years of experience is super important for us. And actually, every single one of our kindergarten classes that are dual language kindergarten classes are self-contained this year. And then the third thing that we also implemented this year is, so ESOL is English for speakers of other languages. It's a high school course. And so you have English, or ESOL 1, which is English 1, and ESOL 2, which is English 2. ELDA is English Language Development Acquisition class, right? So we worked with our two comprehensive high schools to work with their master schedule to do a combined block so that we have extended instructional time for those kiddos at that point. This is truly targeting your newcomer kiddos, the ones who've been here maybe 18 months at all, but like those at the beginning and intermediate levels where they need to have that continuum of time to so that they don't have to like stop and go and whatnot. They can actually, if they're getting into something and they're just about to get it, they can continue through with that. And so having that extended instructional time was important for us to implement this year. So what are our next steps, right? There are best practices and state and federal requirements that we're making sure that we are doing the appropriate things, that every part of our program, whether it's our dual language program or our ESL program, our emergent bilingual across the board, is in line with the expectations at both the state and the federal level, as well as our district expectations for excellence that we have. One of the things that we'll be moving towards going into next school year is at our two comprehensive high schools, being able to identify teachers outside of the English content area, so their math, their science, social studies courses, wherever they are, but have some teachers who've been identified and provided additional training to be able to truly shelter those kids and help them with some additional language support so that the kids can actually access the instruction in English and they're able to really benefit from the instruction in the class that they're sitting in from the get-go. We also know that it's very powerful when you tell kids, here's the goal for your linguistic development, here's what TELPAS wants for you, and here's where you are, and let's make some goals. And let's see how you're doing. And so being able to be very intentional using our ESL specialists on the campuses to be able to work with our kiddos to set goals and then provide them also feedback along the way so that kids can take ownership in their English language development. These are kids who want to do amazing things, and we want to make sure that we're giving them all the tools so that they can be as successful as possible. And then finally, we have our opt-in piece of our dual language program. And one of the things that is a benefit from that program is that we are being able to provide Spanish language instruction to a group of kiddos who would not necessarily have had it at that age level otherwise. And last year, I know the question was, how do you know how they're doing? Like, how do you know how they're progressing? At this point, we have had an assessment piece that happened February, March of their 6th grade year. And we, from that assessment, we're able to then say, hey, do you have enough Spanish knowledge base that we can award you, Spanish 1 credit going in, as a high school credit piece. But we did not have, and still at this point, do not have a truly appropriate and viable Spanish language test. The test that we used to initially identify a kiddo into the dual language program, unfortunately, is not robust enough and doesn't have the capacity to truly track across. It's very repetitive. So basically, let's be honest, after about 3 years of kids seeing it, they're going to be like, oh, I know what the next card is, and I know, like, whatnot. And so we've been looking into and actually having some meetings with some different vendors who have some different tools. The reality of it is that stuff is gold and they want gold for it. And so we're trying to find a nice balance of an assessment tool that meets the needs of what we need. We want to know where are our kids, and I don't want to wait until 6th grade to find out how you are doing on it. We want to be able to do that, but I got to be able to afford it. Let's just be honest on that piece. And so we're still working on it. That is not being left behind. So, questions?
I do have a question on the reclassification slide. Mm-hmm. So I noticed that a lot of the kids were reclassified last year. They were reclassified in 3rd grade, I believe, and then this year in 2nd grade or something like that. The number was really high, like 20-something, but then the other grade levels, a lot of them were 0 or 1. Can you explain that?
Sure. So one of the things that happens in our program is the state says, you know what, you can't reclassify anybody until the end of 1st grade. And so there's this naturally occurring bump, if you will. So kids who might have come in pre-K or kindergarten or even the beginning, and they weren't English proficient enough to not qualify to be part of our program, but were very close. As soon as they're coming out of first grade, if they are able to demonstrate their English language proficiency as well as their academic proficiency in English, then we're able to reclassify them. I think what you're going to see is, so the previous year, you're seeing a little bit of the weirdness that had happened coming off of the previous year's COVID testing nonsense. And so kiddos who typically they might have actually met, at the second grade mark as well, coming out of first, because of that year, because the year before it, the testing happens always that year before of that piece, right? The ability to give them the test and have them meet the mark was not in place. And so you're seeing a weird gig from that. The other piece is, okay, so, and then why does it start just like drip, drip, drip or trickle, right? Across the way is, some of that is a function of the TELPAS exam. Over the years, especially most recently, there has been quite a bit of fine-tuning and tweaking by the state of Texas and TEA as far as how they assess with the TELPAS and what the standards are, expectations are to meet advanced high across the 4 domains. And so for our kiddos who, again, are shy, speaking has really kind of been their Achilles heel, if you will. It is very ominous for some of them to be put in headphones with a microphone and it gives you a blurb and you're supposed to respond. And you've got that amount of time. And so we've also been working really hard to help them understand, hey, they just want to know what you know in this test. It's really okay. And here's what they're going to do to be able to see where you're at. And so we're working really hard. Our teachers are with our students to help them understand how to best demonstrate what they know in the tests, as well as for those kids who won't talk a whole lot. They were going to be an EB all the way through, even if they were in all AP classes in high school. So again, the nice thing about the adjustment that TEA has put forth going into this year is having that composite score capacity to be able to meet reclassification, we think will actually allow us to better demonstrate where our kids are. Because we have a lot of kids who they know English, they got it, they're just not able to meet the mark on that one TELPAS exam. And so working through all those little bits and pieces to get it there. So it's not an easy answer, I guess, is what I'm trying to say as well.
It's just that data tells me, and what you just said tells me that if we can get our kids, the younger we can get them into the program and work with them, before they get self-conscious as well, is what I'm hearing. They typically reclassify sooner.
Yes. Well, and the higher up they are in their grade level, the more academic English they're expected to listen to, respond to, read, and write. And so then that whole, it just adds on to itself and can be overwhelming for a lot of kids.
Then my other question with that is, so going back a slide, I think before the reclassification explanation, you showed the kids how they score on the STAR or on EOCs once they've been reclassified. So once a child has been reclassified, even if they're reclassified in second grade, do we follow them throughout their academic career? Are they still considered reclassified, so then they're part of those statistics?
To an extent. So once the student meets reclassification, then we are required to monitor them for the first 5 years. And it's kind of a hard monitor, if you will, for the first 2 years. And then the state is having us do more of a soft monitor, like they're just keeping up with them for those last 3. And so really I have the ability to say if a kiddo has ever been a part of our emergent bilingual program, right, and has reclassified, because then they would have a certain code that they were a previous member of the emergent bilingual programming, then I can then pull and see, okay, how are those kids doing across the board?
Thank you.
And actually, my questions were very similar to that, because, that slide that showed the reclassified kids, their performance on STAR was very shocking, right? They're very good performers. But it sounds like they are kind of just trickling in into that bucket, a few at second grade, and then, or a bigger chunk at second grade, and then a few later on. And so I was just really trying to understand why that is so, that number is so amazing. Is it?
For the
Or the
second grade
star,
or the,
or the, no, really for the, for the star
starries?
performance for reclass. And then, man, if we could replicate that everywhere, right? So.
well,
That's exactly what I was thinking. We
honestly,
could
it's
replicate that.
kind of the best data that backs up the reason, the justification for having a dual language program in the first place. We know, research tells us that for students who early on who are able to be bathed in multiple languages and really use those different parts of their brain, that they tend to outperform their peers academically, not only immediately after a program like that, but all the way through. And so being able to take advantage of those opportunities, if we could offer it up for everybody, I'd be like, let's go, because we know it's a great thing for our kids to have that mental gymnastics going on. And it even broadens your ability to recognize, you think about Spanish being a Latin-based language. I can think from my own experience. I remember taking the GRE and being like, I don't know what that word is, but it kind of looks like this word in Spanish, and so I think this is the answer, and like, I got it right. So you are able to then transfer information, transfer knowledge that I can have. I wasn't sitting there with, flip cards or whatever, but I was able to use what I had learned and knew and been exposed to in a different language to help me perform and show some additional knowledge in my first language. So across the board, it's a great thing.
And I know we've been on this a long time, but just a really quick comment on your last two slides, especially your second to last. I personally like that you are, clearly pointing out some very specific things that you're doing differently there, and they're science-based. They're based on, there have reasons behind why you're doing them, and I'm assuming you'll continue to follow on how they work. I think that's what needs to be done. So that's great.
Thank you.
Anything else? We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
That'll bring us to item E, adjourn.